and their perspective on children expressing themselves was like, I don't want to hear how you feel about anything. You have food to eat, you have shelter, you have clothes. You feel good. That's how you feel. And that's how you
Mhm.
better feel.
People think we're just going to talk about feelings all day long.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, none of us want kids to talk about feelings all day long. We have work to do. Like you get this phone call and school's shut down, school's open. No, school's shut down. No, there's no buses. No, there's no food.
Yes. I'm by myself. Like this is like, I'm taking care of everyone, but like, does anybody care about my health?
I hear people sometimes who say, "Well, I grew up in a family where, everybody was kind to each other." And I always say things like, "That's fantastic."
Right.
But that's not the skills of emotional intelligence.
No.
Welcome to the Dealing with Feelings webcast. My name is Marc Brackett. I am the founder and director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence and a professor in the Child Studies Center, also at Yale University. Today, I had the privilege of speaking with Dr. Dawn Brooks-DeCosta. Dawn is the Deputy Superintendent of Harlem School District Number 5 and a leader in the field of social and emotional learning, especially as it relates to culturally responsive pedagogy. In the world today, there's some controversy about social and emotional learning. Is it something that schools should do? Is it something that parents should only be doing? Well, Dawn and I had a rich conversation around why social and emotional learning needs to be done in schools and why we need to take a culturally responsive approach to doing so. I loved our conversation, and I know you will too. Please share your comments about the episode and also subscribe to our channel so that you can learn more about how to deal with your feelings. Welcome, Dawn.
Thank you.
So excited to have you on this web series.
Yes.
Um, just give everybody your 2-second bio so we can get acquainted with Dawn.
Yeah, well, I am a longtime educator. I started my journey in education in the fine arts. I was an art teacher for 15 years and then surprisingly transitioned into principal, which I did for 11 years. And I'm currently serving as deputy superintendent for Harlem Community School District 5. I've been in District 5 for 28 years and am in love with Harlem and everything about it and always have been.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mhm.
So maybe we can just start with a little bit more about like how did Dawn become an educator? Like
Yeah.
is that what you wanted to be from childhood or did you decide later? Where did that passion come from?
Yeah, so very interesting. I, again, have always been an artist and I went to the School of Visual Arts and before that really wanted to be a fashion designer. And I used to draw fashions, and this is from when I was very young. But my family very much said, you need to be able to eat and live.
Hmm.
And so perhaps you should go into education so that you could have a stable job and do your painting, etc. outside of that. So that's kind of how it happened.
That's funny. It's funny. I would, as a kid, I wanted to be an actor. And my father was like, "Are you out of your freaking mind?" You know,
Exactly.
and I still
But
think, and maybe we're very similar, that I feel, my presentations are my acting, kind of.
that's what I was going to say is that I feel like you use it.
I
And I
try.
feel like I'm using my creative side all the time.
Yeah. So this series is all about emotions, and we're going to talk a little bit about SEL, social emotional learning, emotional intelligence.
Mhm,
But I really would love to know, you know, how would you describe your
mhm,
own emotional development?
mhm.
That might be a
Um,
surprise question.
right? Surprise. Well, surprisingly, and maybe not, it's something that I have to work on a regular basis. And my emotions can run high, right? And so, I often say to people that I promote this work because I need it myself. And I can see the difference, in just my wellness, my quality of life when I do attend to my emotional needs as well and regulate, but also
Mhm.
recognize when something's happening, you know,
Mhm.
that I need to address. And I want to make sure that what I say and do doesn't impact the next person in a way that is damaging to them or to myself. But I think I didn't learn it until much later.
Mhm.
Um, I wish I had had it when I started teaching, which I did not, and really didn't learn much about it until much later on. I had been a teacher for over 20 years by the time I had learned about emotional intelligence and social emotional learning. It happened very late.
Mhm. So you gave me a good response, but I wanna go, like,
Okay.
we're going early childhood now. So
Oh,
I'm
oh, you're
really
going
just
all the way
curious.
back.
Yeah. I wanna know, like, I mean, I've known you for 20 years probably at this point,
Hmm.
and,
Yep.
but I don't think I've ever asked you, what did you learn about emotions in your family? Like, what was the climate,
Yeah.
growing up? Did you talk about feelings? Did you not talk about feelings? How would you
Yes.
describe it?
So interestingly enough, I grew up as an only child. I did have two stepbrothers that I didn't grow up with, so I grew up in the home as an only child. And my family was extremely supportive of everything that I wanted to do. And because it was just me, I had ample opportunity to express
Mm,
myself, and they were receptive of that, my mother and father. And so I think that I'm certainly, because of my ability to express myself now and be compassionate, it definitely comes from them. I was a bit self-absorbed because it was just me.
mhm,
And, I still to this day value my time alone.
mhm,
And I don't have a problem being alone, which I know some people do. I
mhm.
prefer it, as a matter of fact, even though I have 4 children and
Uh-huh.
5 grandchildren. I'm rarely alone, but when I
Right.
am, I absolutely enjoy it. But
Uh-huh.
I was allowed to express myself at home. Surprisingly, though, in school, I was very, very shy, and so I did not express myself at school. I kind of
Mm,
only felt comfortable to do that at home. And so very sort of withdrawn all through elementary. It got better as it went on, but early on, like if teachers would call on me, I would burst into tears because I
mm.
just did not want to speak out loud at all. And so that happened
Wow.
for several years for me.
Oh, wow. And where was that, by the way?
That was at the St. Gabriel School in East Elmhurst, Queens, where I went for 8 years. And it was my first teaching job as well. I came back and taught there. And
Mhm.
my second grade teacher was still there, and she was
Wow.
a colleague of mine. So,
So, in terms of, like, if I were to ask you for the movie title that would
mm,
describe your childhood kind of emotional development, what would you call your movie of your childhood?
mm, I would call it The Butterfly Gets Her Wings.
Say that one more time.
The Butterfly Gets Her Wings.
Wow, that's beautiful. And so,
Yeah.
explain that to us because that's really cool.
Yeah. So I think that I got a lot of support. Again, I was very shy. Teachers were also encouraging. There were some that were abrasive. It was an old school Catholic school. And so we had nuns and brothers. People often ask about that. And what I remember about my time there is that it was extremely culturally responsive. Like when people
Mm,
talk about Catholic schools and all of that um, in the 70s, right? And 80s, the nuns and the brothers they had really high expectations for us. And so that is, being culturally responsive they didn't feel sorry for us. We were
Mhm.
working and they expected us to achieve and do our
Mhm.
work. And I do remember being in elementary school. It wasn't until the seventh grade that I had the first Black teacher that I think I had had outside of nursery school. So I had a really sort of really conscious nursery school. And then I went to Catholic school, but they really supported us. They recognized that I had a gift. And the arts were something that they cultivated and encouraged in me and celebrated. And I think that that is really the reason why I was able to sort of blossom and get my wings and feel good about something, which I believe now that, students have to find something that they love in the school day.
Mm.
They have to have a reason to be there that they love, something that they look forward to, and then it helps them in all other areas, which I feel like was the same for me, because after a while I became recognized as an artist.
Mhm.
Um, it helped me in all other areas to blossom and bloom and get my wings and be able to, deal with challenges because I already felt a level of self esteem and
Mhm.
encouragement from the community.
That's great. It's I don't know if you know this, but the first big study of ruler was in the diocese of Brooklyn and Queens.
Wow.
And so I don't know if your school was part of that back then, but
Yes, it was. I mean, I can
and
imagine it was.
yeah, the interesting thing, I have a joke about that. So I go to do this presentation. There's some nuns and priests and teachers, and I remember saying, "And we have a new ruler," and that didn't go over that well.
I bet. I bet.
Yeah,
Yeah, the ruler had a different symbol back then.
exactly.
Mhm.
So let's fast forward because I met
Okay.
you when you were going for your master's degree before you went for your doctorate,
Mhm.
and you were studying mindfulness and social and emotional learning.
Yeah,
Um, let's just talk about that period of becoming a school leader.
yeah.
Um, and I think what's interesting because you're saying that your childhood really was aligned with this work in terms of
Yes.
being free to express your emotions.
Mhm.
But you didn't have a formal education about emotions or emotional intelligence, like none of us.
No.
Um, and then you started getting this formal education, like
Mhm.
around because you were you doing any meditation or mindfulness before the graduate program?
Not really, but more of like a spiritual practice,
Uh-huh.
but not in the same sense, but I guess, it's kind of the same thing.
It can be for sure.
Yeah, yeah,
But I'm really curious in terms of, like what got you to say, "Oh my gosh, this is like a missing piece in my life and
mhm,
also in my school's life."
yeah. So interestingly enough, like when I went to TC and first started this with this was actually my second master's. My first
Mm,
master's was in fine arts. And when I went to Teachers College, I had no intention of being a school leader. I was trying to get my 30 and above credits, and people that work in the Department of Education
mhm,
know, like, that's how you go to the end of the salary scale. So that
mhm,
was really the only reason why I was there. I was like, I got to get these credits. It's in the summer. This is going to be, easy for me. I'm going to get these credits. And I was the oldest one there. I had a notebook. Everybody else had laptops. I had been teaching for a long time. I was in the classroom. At that time, when I first got there, I had no intention of being a school leader. Um, and so but I began to get more intrigued about the possibilities. In terms of mindful practice, when I was learning about it, didn't really understand why we were doing self awareness. And I didn't understand it until I actually became a school leader,
mhm,
and saw the levels of stress and depletion that you can feel, but also in the community, the fires, the crisis, that was constantly going on. But I definitely felt like the peace of mind, the ability to like center yourself, and um, there was so much emotion that happens in the classroom that I really had wished that I had had this when I first started teaching.
mhm,
Because classroom, and not that social emotional learning is about management, but I didn't understand how to create a culture in the
Mhm.
classroom that was most conducive to learning for students who had some emotional needs that were not
Mhm.
being met. And so, of course, what happens when the needs are not met is like, they may act out, or they don't have the relationships that they should in the classroom, and then they can't be most successful. So,
Mhm.
the impact that it had on me, experiencing it firsthand, because we were learning about us and learning how to utilize it for us personally. And the impact that it had on me, I was like, okay, this will be great for the classroom.
Mhm.
And then when I became a leader, and just saw the high level of emotion from parents, from students, from teachers, students being sent to the office every time there was an issue. And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, this is not going to be sustainable. Like, I can't be the only person in the building that is solving problems. And so I realized then that everyone needed it. I needed it for sure so that I could maintain, because being a leader is kind of a really lonely position.
Mhm.
I needed it myself, but I realized that the whole community needed it as well.
Nice. What is your take on, I mean, you've seen now that you've been, a leader in the field of SEL, but also a leader, as a school and a district level leader, this kind of pushback on SEL.
Mhm,
And even from people within the Black community,
mhm,
meaning that, SEL isn't for, or it can be used to oppress children of color,
mhm,
which has
mhm.
always bothered me when anybody says that. It just feels, there's something that just feels like hurtful in my soul when I hear that.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious, as a Black woman who's a leader,
Mhm,
how do
mhm.
you think about that? And how do you manage that thinking from within your community, but also just in general?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think about SEL as something that humanity needs. So when I think about it, I don't think about it in terms of race, but I do understand that the approach to it needs to be responsive, culturally responsive. And
Mhm.
I think that it's not the SEL itself that is oppressive, it's the delivery, right? Or who is the deliverer of the
Mhm.
SEL, and what are their authentic intentions for the students that they're doing this with. And so, if the person has a mindset that they are going to control a group of students who they feel disconnected from culturally, then it can be harmful, right?
Mhm.
Because you're not really interested in how I feel. Like, you're not really interested in my emotions. You're interested in your own,
Mhm.
and how we can appease what you would like to see us as in a classroom.
Mhm.
So I think it's all about the delivery and the intention. Do you really care about how I feel? Do you really care about my success? Do you really see me? Do you really celebrate who I am? All of me? And is your help for me with that in mind? That you
Mhm.
want the best for me? The delivery of that, I mean, can come from anyone, right? It doesn't have to be
Sure.
someone that is the same race. But I think
Of
it's
course.
all about the intention. We also talk about emotions culturally, and different cultural groups expressing them differently.
Mhm.
And I think that our acceptance and understanding of that, which really goes back to just knowing your students well, because if you know them well, you know how they interact, you know their
Mhm.
families, you know the neighborhood that you work in. Like, so you're not disconnected in the way that you won't understand that someone's response is a cultural response and not what you're interpreting it as based on your own experience. So, like, am
Mhm.
I imposing my own belief on how you should respond?
Mhm.
Or am I just allowing you to, express yourself? And the last thing is like understanding the life circumstances of people. And if students are experiencing life circumstances that are impacting their emotions validly, right? They are either outraged by something that may be happening politically, culturally, and they have every right to feel that way, that we recognize the validity of emotions based on life experiences and see that child like in their whole selves and their whole life experience without imposing our own beliefs. Um,
Hmm.
so it does hurt me too when people think that there's cultures that don't need it because it is a human need.
Yeah,
That's how I
I
see it.
appreciate that. But at the same time, we have heard, and I think we even saw this, and I'm curious from your perspective,
Mhm.
when you started bringing ruler and SEL into your schools, was
Yes.
there some pushback by the community, by parents and other educators about like teaching kids how to label their feelings and how to regulate?
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, because I feel and have felt so close to the community that I worked in and had a kinship with the community. When I was planning with one of my teachers who was going to be like the lead teacher, we anticipated a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that we thought would be important was that we not create walls between ourselves and the families
Mm-hmm.
with the language around SEL. So sometimes we use a lot of edu-speak,
Mm-hmm.
jargon, when we're really just talking about stress relief and
Mm-hmm.
wellness and well-being. When you talk to families about, do you want your child to have good relationships in school? Do you want them to have friends? Do you want them to feel good? Do you want them to feel loved? Do you want them to feel safe? When you say that, I mean, there isn't a parent who's going to say, I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there isn't a good parent who's going to say, I don't want my child to be happy in that way. Right. But when you start using words, like social emotional learning and emotional intelligence, and if you think about the way that these words have been misinterpreted,
Mm-hmm.
even more today than ever, and
Right.
people have attached other things to these words that are like not what it means. So I think speaking to people authentically about what this is, surprisingly, the kids are never the issue when it comes to this work. Like they're not saying, we don't want that. It's always an adult.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that because we didn't learn this way as adults, I did have a few teachers who were like, I can't do this touchy feely kind of like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't do that. I'm trying to remain, they want to maintain a certain level of authority in the
Mm-hmm.
classroom, like very old school. And they feel like this is a giving away of their power.
Mm-hmm.
So we did everything with the adults first so that they could experience it well before they delivered this to the students. And again, every school is not for everybody. And so that's another piece, like accepting people where they are. If this is really not what you value and this is what we value, then this may not be the place
Mm-hmm.
um, for you in terms of being an educator. Um, the student leadership piece was important too, because the students will lead it if
Mm-hmm.
adults step aside, right? If you create the conditions, if you're not comfortable with it because you didn't learn that way or you didn't grow up that way, if you could just create the condition for the students to lead it, it happens. It's a beautiful thing.
I always thought that there's more variability like in personality and like in your own development than there is in terms of even the cross-cultural stuff around mindsets around this. I grew up in a family where my father was like, toughen up, kiddo,
Hmm.
and that was, my father was a white Catholic guy who
Hmm.
converted to Judaism in New Jersey.
Yeah,
And that's what I grew up with. And he was, very much the kind of like, I'll give you a feeling, you know?
that's right.
And, and I feel like it's more, I don't know if that mindset is always attributed to race or religion,
Right.
other, or is it more attributed to kind of just the history of how people were, the kind of personalities of their parents and their grandparents and their households?
Yeah,
What are
I
your thoughts
agree.
about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree that upbringing has a big part to play. And when you think about that, like you said, there's more cross cultural connection with people and the ways that they were brought up generationally, etc. We had many grandmothers that were raising the children, as I remember when I first started being a leader, and their perspective on children expressing themselves was like, I don't want to hear how you feel about anything. You have food to eat, you have shelter, you have clothes, you feel good. That's how you feel. And that's how you
Mm-hmm.
better feel, you know? So
Yep.
working with them was really interesting too, because we had done some ruler for families work and listening to them talk about the ways that they were brought up, that they were not asked how they felt, right? And we are often just repeating our own experiences. So
Mm-hmm.
they weren't asked. And for them to be asked and understood that we really want to know how you feel, it took a lot for them, but they really appreciated it,
Mm-hmm.
and appreciated the opportunities to talk to their children and grandchildren about how they felt about things that were happening at home. And they had never had this discussion. Like it was not
Mm-hmm.
a discussion they were having because it wasn't about feelings, right? We're just moving. But that we all need it and we need to have an outlet. We need to be able to express. Um,
How
I
do you
do
think that?
remember. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. No, no, you go ahead.
Oh, it just made me think of a student that, was really immersed in ruler, and he used to do, the check-in for us school-wide. We would do it like as a town hall in the mornings, and he had said to me that, he was experiencing something in the store with like some bullies.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very clear that that was not going to be the place where he was going to do what he does with us.
Mm.
He was very clear that if he was in a situation of danger, that he was going to have to react differently. But for me, it was that he knew the difference was like the big thing for me, right? That
Mm-hmm.
he understood that in a safe space, I'm able to do this. But when I'm actually in an unsafe situation, I have to react differently. And so when people feel like, oh, this is not for boys, or this is going to make them weak, or it gives them more power as far as I'm concerned, because they're just able to see things differently, like their perspective was different. I would think even his reaction to the experience of having bullies in the store was different,
Mm-hmm.
that it was more of an issue for them than it was for him. Like he was clear, like there's enough self-awareness happening that it's like, I don't deserve this. This is not what's supposed to be happening. I don't act
Mm-hmm.
like this. But it's unfortunate that they do and that they don't have the skills that I have. And he was very clear about that. So to me, it's empowering. Um, and so it's unfortunate to just hear um, the views on it that are so misinformed.
Mm-hmm. How do you think that? Like, what do you think it takes to transform that culture? What does it take to get one of those grandmas who like didn't grow up with, maybe an emotionally intelligent parent,
That's right.
who, maybe was in a difficult situation to survive and thrive,
Yep.
and thinks that, like we don't have time for feelings. And in
Hmm.
many instances, it makes sense. Like we're
Yeah.
like, we're in survival mode, not in kind of like self-reflection mode. Like you have to have, it's like a privilege to have time to
Yes.
self-reflect.
Yeah.
How do you get any community
Hmm.
um, to to start seeing this in a different light?
Hmm. So I think a powerful thing again was starting with the adults, which is what we've also, because of what I learned there, has been the district wide approach, um, that the adults are really the issue, and
Mm-hmm.
like doing the work with the adults first, but not even about the kids, about them as human beings themselves, their own relationship, their own self concept, allowing them opportunities to express themselves and experience what that feels like. And so we did that collectively with teachers, leaders, and families. Um, and I think the parents being co creators of this is what's important,
Mhm.
that it is a community effort. The children belong to them first, right? We have them for a
Mhm.
couple of hours a day and we love them, but these are their children. So you cannot exclude them from the process. Um, and so I think it was powerful to include them, to have them understand what it was, to co create with them, and then bring it to the children, and then
Mhm.
allow the children the agency and voice in it as well, so that it's not something that was being imposed on them, but
Mhm.
something that they felt. So I think the co creation in a district, we've been talking about co liberation, like being liberated together, like collectively. I think that that is the key to it being community wide, and
Mhm.
not that we know all of this academic stuff and we're going to come in and we're going to fix you all
Mhm.
because we know what's wrong with you and we've done all the research, and so here it is, here it is, we're going to fix you, so that it's not that it comes from the ground up. And as a leader, I had to be really transparent about my need for it myself,
Mhm.
and that I was a part of it and not watching it from the outside. Like, leaders have to be involved in it, and I can't ask people to do something that they don't experience with me. So I certainly can't ask you to be compassionate and then every interaction you have with me is not compassionate at all,
Right.
you know. So
And
that
also,
I think that's important.
you're also making me think about, like, helping people understand kind of their misconceptions about it. And so I think a lot of people think that, teaching kids about feelings is weak, like, or that it is you know, it's like this pendulum that's gone to the place where people think we're just going to talk about feelings all day long.
Mhm.
And I think, you know, none of us want kids to talk about feelings all day long. We have work to do. We have school to do.
Exactly.
Um, and that also that the strategies are tend to make you maybe a pushover or
Mm.
not maybe stand up for yourself,
Mhm.
when I think it's in many ways the opposite, that we're
Absolutely.
trying to empower people with skills and strategies to be able to have the confidence to speak up about what a problem might be in their community or in their home or their family. Which
Absolutely.
also might be some of the pushback I think that we see
Mhm.
now in the that part of why I think some communities are pushing back on SEL
Mhm.
is that I think there's a fear from some groups that kids are gonna, like, have too many insights,
Mm.
you know, or they're gonna
Yes.
be I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
Yes. So it's so funny that you say that because I was just talking to someone the other day about agency
Uh-huh.
and how we happened to be, we were at Columbia University for an event, and there was a protest going on. And, there's often a protest going on, right?
Mhm.
And so it's interesting that everything that we're teaching is about civic engagement and speak up for yourself. And then when they actually do it, we're like, that's too much.
Mhm.
So that makes me think of that. Is like we want the agency, and we say that we want that, and we say that we want them to understand society, and we say that we want them, but then when they start expressing those insights, it's like, uh-oh, like we don't know
Mhm.
what to do with that advocacy that they end up having for themselves, because
Mhm.
they know something is wrong because of what we've taught them. And I think it's the same thing with emotions. It's like, you'll be able to detect when something is wrong, and you'll be able to advocate for yourself that
Yeah, like
this
being bullied or being manipulated,
exactly, this doesn't feel okay. I don't like the way that, or this is impacting me in this way. And, being able to communicate, because it can be uncomfortable telling people how you feel. It can be more uncomfortable for the person that
yeah,
has to receive it, you know?
totally.
So those difficult conversations, like that SEL comes into play, for sure.
Let's do a little bit of a twist over to the pandemic, which
Okay.
I don't know why we want to do that, but
Yeah.
the pandemic hits. It's like,
Yeah.
really, we want to go there?
Yeah.
But because this particular series is about anxiety and managing
Mhm.
anxiety, I'm really curious. Given you were um, you had transitioned to the leadership position, the deputy superintendent position, then, or
No, I
no?
was I was still a principal during
Okay,
the
so you were the
pandemic.
principal.
Yeah.
All right, so you're here. You have hundreds of kids that you're
Mhm.
responsible for. There's a global pandemic. It
Mhm.
hits your community.
Yep.
There's technology issues, there's getting to
Yes.
school issues, there's people out of work issues, there's
Mhm.
every issue you can imagine.
That's right.
So, how did you like what were your go-to strategies for dealing with your own feelings?
Mhm. So everything happened so quickly. Like there was like one day when it was like, okay, the city's going to shut down. You have to transition your whole school into a virtual space. And if we think about this 5 years ago, we didn't know what Zoom, well, we didn't
Yeah.
know what Zoom was, Google Meets, none of it.
Yeah.
And so we had this learning curve that was like hours, getting kids devices. Some people had Wi-Fi, they didn't have Wi-Fi. So for myself, um, I think that, I'm in a place where I have to be a caregiver. And so that kind of kicked in. And in the beginning, I really don't think that I was thinking about my own emotions,
Mhm.
and how taxing and draining it was. I often say, that nobody takes care of the caregiver. And it kind of felt like that as a leader. Um, I remember them bringing me, when we started to come back, they brought me a hazmat suit and said, so this is when we thought like everybody that touches COVID is gonna die. Like that was
Yeah.
the beginning. And so they brought me a hazmat suit with like the whole thing. And they said, if you get a case, you have to be the one to sit in the room with the student until whatever help arrives or whatever, EMS. That's how it was at the beginning.
Wow.
And I think that's when it really clicked in for me, like, I'm by myself. Like, this is like, I'm taking care of everyone, but like, does anybody care about my health? Am I,
Mhm.
um, that was the first, that moment was kind of like, okay, wait a minute. Like, I also want to go home like everyone else.
Mhm.
I have a family. I also don't want to, everything that you all want for your families, I want the same thing.
Mhm.
So um because we had an SEL practice, we were able, and I'm thankful for that because I really don't know how we would have been able to manage if we didn't have that. We were able to say in the beginning that we really want the students to experience as much of the same experience when we're together in the
Mhm.
virtual space. So we were like really strategic about still checking in, still going on the mood meter when we were remote,
Mhm.
still asking people how they felt. We were doing support groups, and I was on the phone. I mean, the work hours were like 24 hours because people were
Yeah.
calling all day and night in a panic, parents in a panic, staff, everyone. Um, but I think because we had the SEL, that really helped us. It helped me to be able to manage through there was so much grief and like you said, job loss and burying people and trying to get people food.
Mm.
The whole school experience turned into something different.
Mhm.
Um, but what we learned was that the school is not a building. The school are the people that make up the community. And so we are the school. So we are the school, we make it what it is, wherever it's going to be. And we sort of empowered ourselves that way, like we're just going to keep this going. But the SEL and the relationships was the reason we were able to make it through successfully for sure. Myself included. I know many people left the field. I just can't do this anymore. Like it became
Mhm.
so taxing, and I actually don't think that we have fully recovered from that
Right.
as educators or students or families yet.
Thank you for that. And I want to get even more specific about
Okay.
your personal, like, what are Dawn's top three go-to strategies for
Oh,
supporting
yes.
her, you know, like you get this phone call and school's shut down, school's open. No, school's shut down. No, there's no buses. No, there's no
Oh,
food.
yes.
There's no, I remember the
Mhm.
cafeteria people couldn't come, right? There was,
Yep. Everything.
and so like you're having a meltdown, you're at home or
Yeah.
you're commuting, you get this phone call. Like,
Yeah.
where does Dawn go to deal with her feelings?
Yeah. So, something that I love about, just learning the meta moment specifically,
Uh-huh.
um, was the step where you stop.
Mm-hmm.
And this was something that I did not do before. Like in the middle of a crisis, I would go straight into like reactionary mode. And every once in a while, I still fall back to that, right? But the being able to stop and really like see what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's my go-to is when something is happening and coming at me that way, if I can just stop and see what's happening. I'm also a big believer in gratitude, and I am always really trying to be grateful, which I have every reason to be for the situation I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it as an honor to lead that school when I was
Yeah.
there, and I felt like I was in service. It's a job of service to me, and so I felt joy about being able to help other people, but it is depleting.
Yeah.
Um, so just being able to stop. I mean, I have all kind. I'm burning candles, incense, like I
It's fine.
sage. I'm doing all of those things. I'm meditating. I know how to step back. I had always appreciated my administrative assistant, Barbara Jackson, who sat outside of my door, and she was a gatekeeper when
Mm-hmm.
I needed a moment. That she was very good at telling people, like, you have to find someone else to solve that problem that you have. Or you can do that yourself. Like if someone's coming to the office, there's no toilet tissue in the
Uh-huh.
bathrooms. Okay, okay. So she doesn't have to be the only person that can hear that. So she was very helpful to me, um, even with my own self care, to be able to notice when I needed a moment, and I've
Mm-hmm.
always been really transparent, even with my staff, when I learned how to do that, when I learned how
Mm-hmm.
to be transparent, which took time, and like not acting like I can fix everything.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always okay and I can always fix things. I learned over time to be much more vulnerable and authentic when I was like, okay, I don't know how to fix that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I need your help, or we have to help each other. Um, I'm tired or I'm sad or, help. It took me some time to learn that, but once I felt like I could lean on the community, that was really how I made it through. And that's how they begin to blossom. And then you start to see things happening without you because
Mm-hmm.
they understand this is all of us. This is not just your thing. This is this is our thing.
So I'm hearing a lot of strategies. I'm hearing,
Mhm.
obviously you talked about the meta moment, that pausing to check in,
Yes.
seeing your best self, obviously.
Mhm. Mhm.
Then there you talked about gratitude, but really you talked about gratitude in two ways. One is just like realistically, I'm in a good place and I'm grateful
Yes.
for that. But
Yes.
also as a way of reframing,
Mm.
like you said,
Mhm.
like being grateful that you're in a leadership position, that you could be of service
Yes.
to other people. That's
Yes.
like because I think that all of us can go through that place. I remember I use the same strategy, which is like if you objectively look at what you have on your plate and what's
Yeah.
happening in the world, you're sort of like, you know, I want to just swear right now because it's like,
Yes.
like I can't take it anymore. This is
Mhm.
crazy. But if you
Mhm.
take that breath and you say, oh, wait a minute, my job is to actually help people problem solvers, to be supportive through this time. It just
Right.
takes you away from the self focus and you
Absolutely.
become other oriented. But then that also depletes you.
Yes.
And so they need strategies, right? For you're using a healthy strategy to help you deal, but then you get
Still.
burnt from using that strategy. So you need other strategies, and that's your incense, your
Mhm.
sage, your
Mhm.
maybe you take a bath. I don't know if you do that
Right.
or not. Or,
Music, everything, all of that. You
art
need that
maybe.
too. Yep, art. I have a friend that I talk to every single day. She was a school leader with me, and I can say everything that I wanna say with no filter.
Hmm. So you've
All of
got
the
that
things.
social support system.
Exactly. So I think you need, and whatever it is for you, you gotta figure out what it is, but it's gotta be something,
Yeah.
you know?
And it's not one thing. It seems like
Right.
you go back and forth, whether it's like maybe you're listening to music here, then you're calling your
Yes.
good friend to debrief
Yes.
or to get some ideas or just to
Yes.
talk to, then you're, reframing, then you're
Yep.
taking a breath. Um,
All of it.
yeah,
Yeah, all of it. And being able to give other people, like, the permission to do those things too, like, and modeling that for people, I think is important so that they feel like, "Oh, it's okay for me to not be okay all the time."
yeah,
In the community. We often say, "Oh, everybody take care of yourself. Make sure you practice self-care." And then you actually create no opportunities for them to do that.
right.
So what's the situation, like, what does self-care look like in this school? What does it look like for educators? What does it look like for me? What does it look like for the parents, students? Um,
I'm curious to know how you like, is it, you shared you grew up in an emotionally supportive family,
mhm.
which is I didn't have that. I had I had like a little bit of like it was a supportive, then it was not so supportive, then it was
Yeah,
I don't know what it was.
yeah.
But I hear people sometimes who say, "Well, I grew up in a family where, everybody was kind to each other." And I always
Mhm.
say things like, "That's fantastic,
Right.
but that's not the skills of emotional intelligence."
No.
Being kind and nice doesn't necessarily mean you have underlying skills. And
Oh,
I'm
no.
curious now, you're a grandma, which I keep on
Mhm.
forgetting because it's hard to see you as a grandmother.
Yeah.
Um, but in where you're at in your life now, if you were to do a reflection
Mhm.
about your development, going back to that opening question,
Mhm.
what do you notice as the added value of having learned all about these skills?
Yeah. So when you ask me about, growing up, it's not something that I've really ever thought about before. And being able to express my emotions in a family, like, they weren't always positive emotions. And it wasn't that they agreed with what I was saying most of the time, but I was given the support to be able to validly have an emotion and express that. And then
You
one,
weren't punished for that. You weren't punished for your
no, I
feelings.
wasn't punished for disagreeing or for being upset. I was allowed to
You had the permission to
express,
feel.
permission to feel whether they agreed with me or not. And so it wasn't until I learned the skills. So I think that I didn't make the connection between that and myself as an educator
Mhm,
until I, went through the learning around it and how it could benefit my students.
mhm,
Like, I was using something, but I didn't understand that I could also give this to others or share this with others. Um, it was transformative, to allow them the same thing that I was allowed, which is, I don't, and I do it still when I have difficult conversations with people, when there's an angry parent, when there's a staff member that's struggling, when there's a child with anxiety, that to allow people to validly experience what they're experiencing and express it with some compassion coming from me. And
mhm,
I don't have to agree. It's not even about whether I agree with what you're saying. It's that I understand that you're having that experience. And because, and I'm going to validate that. And compassion is also a verb. Like, I'm going to listen. If you just want me to listen, if you want help, I'm going to do that. Um, I need to know how you feel, and I want to authentically know that. Um, I appreciate learning that.
Mm-hmm.
because I don't think that I would be able to interact with the multitude of people that I do now. I don't think that my school community would be in the place that it is now,
Mm-hmm.
um, where relationships are strong, even when it's difficult, which is when you need them to be strong the
Mm-hmm.
most. This is not about everybody agreeing with each other all the time or about being happy all the time, because it's just not a natural state. But it's like, what are the strategies when things are not okay? How do we manage them?
Mm-hmm.
But that's been the trajectory that I appreciate learning. I appreciate people being open to it at all from me as a leader, to travel in this journey with me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and still the same thing in the district, that there are other leaders that are willing, because I know that it works and I know that it'll transform your environment. And then I know the students will learn more and I know that people will get along. But so I've seen it and I know that the impact that it has. And so that's what I want to share with people.
Nice. Can you share a little bit about your the work that you've done specifically in Harlem?
Hmm.
And also, you wrote a book or co-wrote a
Yes.
book with a friend or colleague
Yes.
to help people see kind of the pedagogical approach that you're taking.
Yes.
Just give us a little taste of that and how it
Hmm.
works.
Yeah. So first of all, here's the book. And so I did write this book with Dr. Mark Anthony Gooden, who is one of my professors at Teachers College. Um, and the book is really about my experience as a school leader, the ups, downs, challenges, how it started, all of that, highs, lows, everything, examples, questions, anything that school leaders can use. I was fortunate enough to, I mean, this was really the topic of my dissertation, was around culturally responsive social emotional learning and what does it look like. And what I found out was that many leaders wanted that but didn't know how to do it, like didn't know what does it look like in action. We know that it's a good thing to do, but how do we do it? And so through that work, we were able to get a grant in the district, to do this work across 23 schools. And really, it is about the leadership, first, and the leaders being the champions of the work, but also experiencing the work themselves and all of the self care that they need as leaders and the self awareness that they need before they can deliver this to
Hmm.
others. They have to advocate for their communities, they're building relationships, they're managing partners, they have to get test scores up, they have to manage every difficult conversation,
Hmm.
they have to be responsible for everything, whether they're in the building or not. And so it was kind of like, what are all the things that make a culture in a school that is culturally responsive, but also centers everyone's emotions? Um, and so I've been leaning on partners to be able to provide this for the schools. You all at Ruler, Yale have been a strong partner for us. I think we have 17 of the 23 schools that are
Hmm.
engaging and spent the whole first year just learning as adults and are
Hmm.
now implementing on the ground. And it's just beautiful to go to the schools and see all the creativity happening with that. Pure Edge with mindful brain breaks,
Hmm.
and really talking about the neuroscience of stress on the brain. We've been doing that with our social workers, guidance counselors, parent coordinators. A lot of these people were in the trenches, even from the pandemic. We had like crisis teams and they never got any support. Like they were just managing
Hmm.
every other crisis and they never actually got anything themselves. And so we've done a lot of work with them, healing, restorative work with Morningside Center. And we did emotional intelligence coaching with all of the principals, all of the assistant principals,
Hmm.
um, yoga, like giving everybody everything so that they can find the thing that is doing it for them and their community. So it's just a blessing to be able to share that with all of the schools. And we're seeing progress. We're seeing academic progress in the district, which has not happened in a very long time. And I
Nice.
certainly attribute that to the shift in mindset and community from that deficit mindset to this strength based.
Mm.
supportive culture of caring for each other that I know is the reason why we're seeing the progress that we are.
Awesome. So, my last kind of big question for you
Mhm.
is one that requires a little bit of mindfulness.
Okay.
And just going to ask you to just get settled,
Okay.
relax, which you are
Hmm.
already, but
Yes.
um, and to imagine a world where all children
Mhm.
and the adults who serve them, parents, teachers, leaders, are emotionally intelligent. What do you see in that world that's different from the world that's today?
So I see abundance and I see that there's going to be so much that we're able to do as a people, as a community, to solve the world's problems and all of the things that we see happening, all of the suffering, that in that world where people are more compassionate and caring of others, that we can remove barriers that are preventing us from each other, preventing us from being able to do what we know is right. Um, and so I just see abundance, that there's so much for all of us that we won't see the same level of suffering that we're seeing if everyone has that. Um, and so that's what I would say.
Thank you. Don, I know that people are going to want to learn more about you. So, can you tell us firstly, what's the name of your book?
So the name is The Change You Want to See, and it is from Solution Tree. It's also on Amazon. Um,
And
and it
how
is
else
about
can
my journey.
is there a website that people can go
There
to?
is a
Um,
website. It's crasel.net, CRASEL.net, and everything that I'm doing, every ways to reach me, professional development, see what's happening in the district. All of that is there at the website.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This was great. I mean, we're always talking. We could just
Yeah,
talk for hours.
I know. I had to cut it off actually.